nice to meet you, Sasha Hodder. You're a lawyer. You've been representing crypto companies for a bit now. I've seen you on Instagram, and you're on Twitter as well, I believe, right? How's life? How do you like this industry?
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's you get to work with really smart people all the time, so that's, I think, one of the best parts of it. It's always interesting people that are coming up with cool things, so it's fun to help them or see their projects succeed.
Yeah, it's got a lot of really strange and interesting people, very smart people.
Yeah, eccentric.
Yeah. Eccentric, very eccentric people. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, so law and Bitcoin, you were just in a panel. What was the most interesting topic that you guys touched on that panel?
So we talked a lot about the safe harbor proposal that Commissioner Hester Peirce has put forward, and so she addressed a big challenge with token issuers these days. So after all the plethora of SEC actions we've seen in the last 2 years, no one's really able to launch a token that without implicating the SEC's securities laws. And if they want to launch the legal way, then they have to either do Regulation D, where they limit it only to accredited investors, or this thing called Regulation Crowdfunding, where they can access non-accredited investors, but they have to do it through a crowdfunding portal that costs $10,000 minimum to get set up on. Or they have to do Regulation A+, which the SEC has to approve first, and it costs the company, it's like doing a mini IPO, and it costs the company almost $100,000 to get everything set up. And then a lot of them, they pay that much money, it goes to the SEC, and the SEC doesn't approve it. I think only 1 or 2 Blockstack got approved, and I'm not sure if there's ever been another one. And even when those companies, have a successful fundraise, the token is then automatically a security, and it can't be listed on a traditional crypto exchange because they're not set up to sell securities. So she proposed a safe harbor where we allow basically like the 2017 ICOs to happen, but they have to, the person selling it has to say who they are, like file a statement with the SEC, and the anti-fraud laws will still apply. So they can't lie to investors, but otherwise they have 3 years to become what the SEC will deem network maturity or sufficiently decentralized, and then it will not be considered a security, and it can trade on the crypto exchanges.
That's fascinating that sufficient decentralization is already becoming a legal standard, right?
Yeah, but that's what everyone's arguing on right now. How are they going to define that? So they're looking at like how many nodes someone has or how much trading volume it has, but there's a lot of metrics that can be gamed in crypto. Like you can easily watch trade and you've got exactly none of it. So that's where everyone's saying there's a problem with the safe harbor proposal, because how do you become sufficiently decentralized?
Yeah, so proof of work might be one where you can actually anchor yourself on, right?
I don't, proof of work is never going to be a security in my opinion. Like if it's launched that way, they can't. They can only attach jurisdiction from the SEC if you're selling it as a company with the giving an expectation of profit based on your own work. Whereas proof of work is automatically, I think, sufficiently decentralized.
Okay, but let's say you could do something like like half of them are like Ethereum, right? Ethereum did an ICO, so to speak, and then they also are proof of work. The interesting thing there is that the proof of work it's scarce, right? So every hash is spending in electricity. You could measure the electricity costs in dollars spent, right? And that's something that would be hard to fake. So I don't know, maybe there's something there.
Yeah. So they said that Ethereum already is sufficiently decentralized.
Yeah. That was really interesting. Yeah.
So that's kind of the standard. If you can be as good as Ethereum.
That's a tall standard and a low standard at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So, one of the topics that people talk a lot about is sort of, especially in a Bitcoin, a shitcoin minimalist or maximalist sort of space, is what is the point of a token, right? And I think the major critique that's come from out of the industry is that if you're trying to create a currency, you're probably a scam, because currency status is something that's very difficult to acquire, and it seems to be something that happens organically in general. Private currencies are generally very unreliable. Now that seems to be where the SEC sort of situation comes in. I mean, I don't know. It depends how it's issued, right? What do you see as some of the, but on the other hand, like I see, like, okay, if you, as a company, you need to raise money, and to raise money, you need to financialize capital, right? And you need to get investment if you want to do anything relevant and big. So stocks and voting equity are really, really important. What do you think about that sort of dichotomy?
So it's tough, because working with companies who have taken on investors, and those investors, one company I'm with, the investors have sued them, and it's caused, it was only $3 million raised only, but like in the context, the investment money ran out almost 2 years ago, but the investors are still suing them, saying we want all more information about your patents and all this stuff, and it's caused this company so much of a headache and legal bills and stuff away from what they could be working on, which is their passion. So the idea that this company could have sold tokens and not have to answer to these investors, they'd be a lot better off, but they're honest, good people typically, whereas a lot of the token sellers turned out to be, big liars and scammers. So, the idea that the investor controls the company, I mean, there's some merit to it, and I think like there needs to be some accountability from the company creating the project to their investors, and with the tokens, there's no accountability there. So the person launching the token could just go, buy a boat, and we saw that a lot of them did. So it wasn't good, but the idea of being able to raise capital without all this regulations was kind of nice.
Right. Yeah, the accountability is the key piece in those things, right?
Which Commissioner Pierce's thing will still hold people accountable, because it still applies the anti-fraud provisions of the SEC. So, in theory, it could be a nice blend of the two.
Right.
But I think, in terms of tokens being good investments, who cares if the investor wants to buy it and the company's not lying about what it is they're selling? I mean, we could go downstairs here and put our life savings on a roulette table. So why not allow them the option, if they want to buy this thing, let them.
Yeah. The trick there is where the marketing is, right? So how are they promoting it? Right? Yeah. That's the difference between fraud and honest sort of.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. If you're with this safe harbor, they're supposed to release, certain things about how much tokens the owners are holding back for themselves, how the whole protocol works, like they need to release their code and other things like that. But
okay, so it's got to be open source some degree, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. That's moving faster than I thought it would move. So that's exciting.
But
at the same time, it's really slow.
From this being a proposal to actuality, it might be still a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, because she has to get all the other SEC commissioners to agree to it.
Right. Okay. So that's moving up the SEC sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
But it's coming. A lot of people criticized it heavily, because what if at the end of the 3 years the company doesn't achieve sufficient decentralization or network maturity? Then what happens to their investors? And, yeah, and that definition of what is the network maturity.
Yeah, what is the network maturity of it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then what happens to all the coins that already launched with ICOs? Would they be kind of grandfathered into this thing, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it automatically gives the SEC jurisdiction, because the person is signing some document saying, this is our token offering. So we agree to comply with the anti-fraud provisions. Where right now, if a token is supposed to be a utility token, which a lot of people say there's no such thing, but I mean, we have case law that shows that if something's a good or a service, it's not an investment contract, in which case the SEC has no business governing them. But if we move into this model, that we're going to actually probably give the SEC more jurisdiction over this. I would love to see it all just go as commodities, like under the CFTC's jurisdiction, but it's
depends on the issuance, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the coins that are respectable, at least in my field of sort of influence, or not influence, but like the people that I talk to, right, are coins that are actually having proof of work mined from the beginning, right? So you have like obviously Monero is one of the big ones, right? Ravencoin is one of the ones that are out there. That you can look at them and from that perspective, you say, well, it doesn't have an ICO sort of pre-mine, right? Dash was heavily criticized for the pre-mine. That was an accidental sort of big issuance at the beginning, right? So yeah, there's a lot of. That would be probably a good place to start. But
yeah, I always look at it like, so if I'm working with a company that's trying to start an exchange, they can't list securities on the exchange unless they want to go become a national securities exchange, which is a big undertaking. But if they just want to start a crypto exchange, I usually say go ahead and list your proof of work coins. Those are not securities,
right?
And then the ones that started with an ICO, those are the ones I usually just like. If for a quick analysis, that's the line in my opinion. But,
right. That's interesting. So that's like actually a legal precedent in some sense, or at least a good legal defense anyway.
There's enough case law now on Bitcoin being a commodity and not a security, and commodities you can trade them without, the crypto exchanges can trade them as long as they're not doing swaps or derivatives on them. So
okay, right on. Let's switch topics to privacy. So the CEO of Dropit recently got arrested, right? And I don't know the details exactly of the case, but there's talk about that he was running a mixer, and he's been accused of money laundering in some sense. And I don't even know what Dropit was before recently.
I never heard of it either, or Helix, but apparently Alpha Bay was a darknet, kind of like a second Silk Road, or 11th Silk Road or something. There's lots of them now, I guess, but drugs were being sold on the dark web through this Alpha Bay, and then the money was going from there into this mixer called Helix, and then getting sent to people. And so they charged him with money laundering, which the requirements for money laundering is, one, there is a knowing requirement, so you have to know that you're doing it, but using like illegal proceeds and cleaning it. So I think the money laundering charge will likely stick if the facts that are brought, are actually true, that it was drug money coming into a mixer for the purpose of cleaning it. But the scary, or the case of first impression, I guess, with this one is that they also charged him with operating an unregistered money service business under federal rules. Well, in order to be required to register as an MSB, you have to be either an administrator of a coin and an exchanger. Those are the two, things where you have to register. And then they said users of coins don't need to register. Well, to be an exchanger, you have to be in the business of changing something usually, and sending it to a third party. So here he's taking, I'm the mixer, you send me your Bitcoin, I send you back Bitcoin. Is that an exchange, or are you just getting the same asset back? Usually you have to change it from fiat to Bitcoin, or from Bitcoin to, say, Ethereum or something for it to qualify as an exchange. But I think, it's where the facts are so poor or so clear cut, it looks like, on the money laundering. Hopefully this doesn't just get wiped into it as well. And then the future of, every time someone's trading Bitcoin, now they need an MSB license or registration through FinCEN, which requires that you KYC everyone, you do the OFAC check on everyone. So it really targets or goes after the ability to anonymously transfer Bitcoin, which thus far has remained unregulated. So that's, I think, where the bad part of that case is.
That's dangerous. What do you think? Do you think they're trying to sue for that, or at least they're bringing that up to test the law to see what's going on, or do you think it's a plausible argument? Could it actually settle like that? I mean, it could,
It
but
could,
like, how likely
yeah.
could is it?
I hope it's unlikely, but
Yeah.
it's gonna come down to whether Bitcoin's fungible or not. If
Right.
they say that one Bitcoin is different from the Bitcoin you
Right.
send into the mixer is a different asset than
Right.
what you're receiving back,
Right.
then it could be considered an exchange.
Right.
So
Interesting.
I don't know the answer to
That's
how
going to be an
how it'll
interesting
go.
case, yeah.
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 But there's also been talks that Mnuchin is coming out, or FinCEN's going to come out with some new guidance. So last year we saw that on May 9th they put this big thing out saying, basically saying if you're non-custodial you're okay, but everyone else you have to register as an MSB. And the area of privacy coins and mixing, they got it all conflated. Like nothing that they wrote really made sense. And same with dApps. That they make sense on the stuff they've been looking at from 2013 or so, but the new stuff they weren't quite sure how it worked. And now I think they've had another almost year. They might be coming out with something more guidance.
So you're thinking like the DeFi and Ethereum kind of loan type stuff, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. So Mnuchin might come up with something on that.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about privacy and fungibility in Bitcoin and that tension, right, between regulators and compliance officers and the fungibility of the coin. Do you see, and one of the things that's been said is that the next great conflict might be around it. Maybe it won't, and hopefully it won't, right? But it could be. It might be around defending the fungibility of Bitcoin, because if that cracks, that could cause a lot of problems, right? And there's an interesting case from I think the 1800s that I heard about it. And loosely the story is that there's this lord or this sort of prince or something. He had this bar of gold and he was transporting it somewhere. They got mugged, right? That bar of gold had a stamp on it and it got stolen, right? Well, somehow the prince or the lord ended up discovering that it was in a bank, right? So he sued the bank for it, right? That case went to court, and the court settled that even though yes it is his bar of gold, they can't return it forcefully, or they can't return it because that would break the fungibility of money, and it would cause such a negative impact on society that it's just not worth it. So they made an exception for that.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's like an old sort
I
of
gotta check
yeah,
that out.
yeah,
That'd
you
be
gotta
a
look
good
for that one.
read.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just curious how that's gonna play out.
Yeah, so the fungibility thing, what I'm seeing is, so I work with a lot of Bitcoin ATM companies, and they are exchangers, so they do need to register with FinCEN. But the requirements from FinCEN are actually a lot less than what the banks are requiring. So in order to get a bank account, the bank wants to protect itself from its regulators, so they require that the MSB have all this additional compliance than what is actually written in the, what they're required through the government. So then this banking standard is just becoming the norm, where people have to use like chainalysis and things like that, and prove, this. It's all really ridiculous, I find, but it's like you just have to have all these pages of here's the training log I did, and it's like a bit of a charade, really, to show the bank that you're taking your compliance really seriously and not laundering money. Behind it all, though, FinCEN's an agent of the IRS, so behind it all, I think, is the goal of capturing who's doing what, so you can tax, so the government.
Yeah, and the
can tax
IRS
it.
recently invited Bitcoiners, I believe, and the crypto industry to speak with them or something like that. That's what I heard.
Oh, I didn't. I
picked that one
didn't
up,
know that. Yeah.
Yeah, there was like an invitation of some sort. So I guess we'll have to pick that conversation up.
Well, there is the Coin Center proposal that they make a de minimis exemption, so that I think the new number that they're doing is like anything under $300 would not be taxable.
Right.
So maybe that's what it was.
Interesting.
But their one about the airdrops, their guidance they came out with a few months ago was really bad.
On airdrops?
Did you see that?
No, I missed that.
So the IRS published their first guidance on Bitcoin since 2014, where they said now that airdrops and forks are taxable. But I think they were just doing it to get Bitcoin Cash, like maybe capture that. They probably didn't realize how many forks and airdrops are really out there, and the practicality of trying to figure that out.
I did hear about that.
It was really poor.
So what happens there? Like, people just fight that, or
I mean,
it's not enforceable almost, right? Like,
I don't think it's enforceable. That's not legal advice, but good luck to any accountant even trying to figure out and go back. And a lot of the time when you got an airdrop, it might have been worthless, so you're supposed to count it as income at the time that it was received. Well, if it was worthless at the time it was received, it wasn't even on an exchange yet, then what, you had no income anyway. So But it's just crazy to think, like, if I had something that was worth money, I could just send it to you without you asking, like, just by knowing someone's address. Or
and I acquire a
then you've now got some duty to pay tax on something that you might not have cashed out or even known that you had. Like, so it's pretty weird.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. It definitely, it's not, doesn't sound like they understand what they're talking about enough.
So if they invited people to talk with them,
that's probably why.
They probably got so much criticism after that thing.
It's interesting, and I've heard that the IRS is actually underfunded now, and they're overwhelmed. They've made a few missteps in the past year and a half or so. I don't know if you know anything about that.
No.
So I heard that
it's hard to believe they're underfunded.
Right. Yeah, so what I heard was that the American government shut down I think it was early last year, right? And apparently that shutdown somehow overwhelmed the IRS because they couldn't function to catch up with. It was right before tax season or something like that, so they got overwhelmed with that, and then. Anyway, I've been seeing stories about the IRS.
I'm so sad to hear they're overwhelmed.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's just is really really interesting. What else is on your radar these days?
Oh geez, it's just pretty much everyone that I'm working with is dealing with these money transmission rules.
Right.
So I did just get a response from FinCEN to a question that a lot of my different clients had that I had asked it a few different times without getting a response, and then finally I did. It might not be very interesting to your viewers, but it was a big deal. It saved people. So the CTR filing requirement, a lot of lawyers were debating it, of if you have to file a currency transaction report, if you are a registered money service business, if you're dealing with a $10,000 transaction in cash, you're required to file this report with the government. But people were trying to say that cash and crypto are the same thing. So if you're taking a wire in, like say you're an OTC desk, and you take a wire in and then you send crypto out, do you need to file a currency transaction report? And I got the response that no, you don't, which is what I thought it was. But all these other, a lot of other law firms, it was a big debate over the last year of whether or not, I guess if you really wanted to be on the safe side, you would just file it, because they say in that May 9th guidance that it can be, if it's cash or something of monetary value, or they didn't use that exact word, but basically they said they left some room for
right?
So now I got clarity on that last week, which was it was exciting.
That's great. I want to ask you about Lightning, but hang on a second.
Yeah.
One of the other things one of this idea that's floating around is that Lightning is, because as a node you're kind of replaying money, right? That makes you a money transmitter, right? When you just said that the definition of an MSB is that you're exchanging the money. So what's your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I don't know right now. I think it's going to turn a little bit on that case.
That case is going to be important.
Right now, so are they taking custody of the coins when it goes into the Lightning thing? So that's, I think, a big question.
Yeah, it's a custodial.
I don't think they are. Is the way I understand it is you still have custody over your own funds just because it's in a channel. So if they can make the argument very clearly that it's non-custodial, then there's no way that you're a money service business.
Right.
If for some reason it ends up being looked at as though the Lightning network is the one that has custody, or the channel. The channel operator has your coins and you can't access them. When it's in that channel, then it would probably be money transmission. So I think that's going to be the difference. And then the other, so that's one look at it, and then the other look at it is, what are you exchanging? So typically, the way I've looked at it is, if it's Bitcoin getting exchanged for other Bitcoin, that's not actually an exchange. If it's Bitcoin getting exchanged for fiat or for a different cryptocurrency, then that's the exchange level to me that triggers the criteria to register. But if it's just Bitcoin to Bitcoin, and especially if it's non-custodial, it should not require registration.
So, have you looked at atomic swaps? Are you aware of what atomic swaps are?
You know, I've heard the name lots, but I don't know much about them.
Well, it's kind of like Lightning, right? So it's a multi-sig with a time lock, and then another different chain has multi-sig and a time lock, and then you have this little magic thing where you can automatically swap two coins at the same time. And there's no point of trust, because the when you push the button, both transactions trigger at the same time, and they have to trigger at the same time, right? Like it's like you have the keys the button's inside an envelope. You open the envelope, and the button's push for both at the same time, something like that, right? But that has to be run on somebody's computer, right? So that would not be, they're good because they're non-custodial, fundamentally non-custodial, but they are an exchange. And
if it's a non-custodial exchange, it's still safe.
Okay, great. Yeah. Oof, that's so good news for atomic swap wallets. Yeah.
Unless what people are worried that remember we talked about Mnuchin coming out with some kind of guidance. That's what people are kind of worried, that guidance might take away some of that non-custodial being outside of their regulation.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
okay. Okay.
But as it stands right now, anything that's non-custodial is not required to register.
And where does that standard come from?
The May 9th guidance.
May 9th guidance. Got it. Okay, and that was from the IRS.
Well,
from FinCEN.
Yes, but through FinCEN.
Through FinCEN. Got it. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. That was, I think, really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. Hopefully, I don't know, it's so boring, and like it's the law in this area is so intricate. Like it's it's been fun watching it all develop, and how each thing that the agencies say, how it's going to impact the industry. But I think the industry keeps moving like a little bit quicker than the government. So they keep building the atomic swaps and the decentralized things, and the government should not have a place in Bitcoin ecosystem, or they shouldn't be able to impact it too much, except like that proof of keys thing. I think that if everyone actually holds Bitcoin themselves and does everything through the non-custodial side, we won't have to worry about all these fungibility challenges. But it's because everyone's using these exchanges. So if more people could figure out ways, like there's ATMs now that are coming, that you can, if you sell your Bitcoin at an ATM or other places where you're not putting it onto an exchange, then it's going to keep a higher degree of chainalysis Bitcoin. But all the Bitcoin that goes through all the different exchanges, that's where it's creating these. That's where the tension is coming from. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But
well, that'd be great. I mean, we'll see what happens. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really fun talking with you.